Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 23, I believe. Today we are going to chat with you about New Year's goal settings as we're currently coming up to Christmas, and this might be something that's running through a few of your minds at the moment. But I suppose everything that we'll chat about today, these are all things that you can implement at any point of the year. I suppose it's a good way to start it off. That often we do use the start of a new year as a kickstart or get go. But if you happen to let the new year pass by, these kind of goal settings are handy to keep in mind and to put into practice at any point of the year. But so I suppose we'll jump into it. What's the best kind of way to start in with this?
I suppose maybe one of the first things we look at is looking at how do you actually define it. And over the courses, we look at actually having that one definitive goal that you reach isn't always the main thing you want to achieve. But let's look at framing that or setting it up first. And generally, you'll use the SMART principle or the SMART acronym. So specific, measurable, achievable, it can be realistic or relevant, and then timely or time bound. So specific is you want to achieve a certain thing. So I want to be 78 kg, and it's measurable then, and that there is a measure on the weighing scales that'll tell me if I've made it or not. Or if I want to increase a level of fitness, I want to run 5k in under 22 minutes, or I want to bench press 100 kg by whenever, and then you put your time on by 23rd of February, 15th of March, 18th of July, whatever it might be. But also making it like realistic or achievable to where you're currently at. If I'm currently at bench press 50 kg and I say I want to bench press 100 by 22nd February, not that achievable. If I'm currently at 100 kg and I want to weigh 78 by St. Paddy's Day, also not really achievable. So it depends very much on framing it that way. Generally, you're kind of looking for an 8 to 10% improvement based on where you currently are, but that's very dependent on where you currently are and what it is you're measuring.
Yeah, and actually the big one for me is making sure that whatever goal or target that you are setting in place there, that it is specific. Like that often does get a little bit overlooked, where like things like, oh, I want to be healthier. What does that actually mean? Like what changes are going to be required to bring that about, and what measures then for the second point are you going to be able to measure to see that you're healthier? Or I want to be fitter. You know, like it's a big broad term, but what does fitter actually look like? So being very specific like that, like, oh, say I want to get my I want to run 5 kilometers, or it might be I want to run 1 kilometer. I want to be able to run for a full kilometer. It might be something as basic as that, but setting that very specific target there, as opposed to saying, I want to be able to, I want to get fitter. Like it's too open. So just being very specific with whatever goal you set, I think is key. And like you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be anything massive or anything kind of, world changing or anything, but just being specific when you are making that. I think that's often one area that does get a little bit overlooked for me anyway with clients.
I think a lot of it is just taking the time to focus on that goal. Because I think for a lot of people, they'll be like, right, well, I want to lose weight. Okay, I'll skip to how do I do that? What are the best ways to do it? And then they'll have all the good intentions of the world. They'll be Googling, how do I do this? They'll set themselves up, but they don't really know what they're looking for. Whereas just by taking that, like, you shouldn't come up with your goal in 10, 15 minutes. There should be a couple of days where you sit down, you really think about it and kind of analyze it a bit. Like it's almost like a homework assignment, really. Like, what exactly do you want? And like the more detailed and exact your goal is, the easier it's going to be achieved, because you're going to have, like, knowledge is power. The more information you have about where you want to get, the easier it's going to be to get there.
Can be worth asking the question as well. This kind of leads us into like the ways of breaking it down to achieve that. But like setting this one thing that you want to achieve, whether you do or not, it's going through the process of getting there that will ultimately lead to you becoming a little bit happier or a little bit more satisfied or like that. Like if I'm currently at 5 kg and I want to get to 78, like on this one specific day, if I step on the scales, I'm 78, I'm happy for the next few minutes or maybe for the rest of that day, but that's not going to set me up to be a happier person in general. It's how I implement a variety of changes to be a lighter person, which like, and I assume you would become a lighter to be that bit healthier. It's not a goal of mine. Like I'm just using it as an example, but say it's becoming that healthier person. That's ultimately what should bring you to kind of more happiness or more joy over time, and changing yourself, your kind of the way you identify as, or who you identify as, is what's ultimately going to lead to you being happier about implementing all that stuff, getting in there. And just basing it all on that one specific moment of, I measured this specific measurement on this specific day, that's there as your North Star. But ultimately, whether you make the North Star or not, it's going through the right steps to get there. It's the journey to get you there that should bring you the greatest level of satisfaction.
Yeah.
There should also be, I suppose, regardless of your goal, it shouldn't be built to this one all-encompassing moment. Like, say, for example, weight, there should be progress markers along the way. Like, you should be keeping yourself accountable along the way, rather than just blankly trusting the process until D-Day and then finding out, oh, like, regardless of if you haven't been doing anything properly or if you've been doing everything properly, and then whatever, this just one day, I don't know, maybe you drank loads of water or something just before the scales and the scale reading isn't really true, so it's showing that you didn't lose as much weight as you can. But if you're tracking things progressively as you go through, regardless of what you're trying to achieve, at least you know you're on the right track. So it means that one day doesn't mean everything. You can see that you have been achieving things, you have been going the right direction, regardless of one bad day.
Mm-hmm. Which is, it's also incredibly important, Shane, for being able to look back at how far you've actually come. If you have that, I suppose, data tracked, you have notes taken. That doesn't mean you have to be using a tracker on your phone or whatever. It could be just it could be a journal that you're keeping, but that you can see the changes that you've made. You've noted them, you've tracked them, and you can see the impact that they're having over time. So if you do happen to experience that say on the 11th of June you wanted to be X weight, or you wanted to run something in this time, but you didn't necessarily hit that target, it's very easy to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater there and just kind of say, oh, it wasn't worth it. But if you can look back at all the improvements you've made, then you can kind of take a lot of solace from that like, right, you have just slightly missed your target, but that doesn't negate the actual improvements and changes that you've made that you can see, and being able to look back on it. And often this is something that happens when people go working with a coach, or a nutritionist or an S&C coach or personal trainer, and their coach will kind of remind them of all this, and they'll have tracked it for them, and they'll be like, look, this is how far you've come, this is how far you've improved. But if this is something that you're doing by yourself, keeping track of it to some degree is so important, because you have to be able to look back and see where you've come from. It might be something, for some people it might be taking a picture, day one in the mirror and just saying, hey, this is how I look. They might never step on a scales or anything, but they might be able to look at that day one picture. They might take a day 30 picture, a day 60 picture, a day 90 picture, and then put them all together to see, oh, look at the improvements here, look at the changes. But again, it's a small amount of tracking that it really, I suppose, it helps you to appreciate the changes you've made and the habits you've worked on, improving your day to day.
That tracking as well can also help you to be accountable and to just give you those kind of gentle daily or weekly reminders that I'm following this process. A book I've read, actually I've read it at least once, if not twice, and I've listened to it as well, that I found really, really useful for just building on where you're going, is James Clear's Atomic Habits. I think he based it on, he's never actually come out and said it, but when I heard a few interviews with BJ Fogg, a psychology researcher in America as well, his research seems really like what James Clear says. So I assume his book is based on BJ Fogg's research, but they look at like implementing small incremental changes over time. And they're ultimately what lead to you getting closer to that goal or becoming more like that person you want to be like in the future. Now, James calls them atomic habits, and they're very much process-based, that they will set up these like really, really small behaviors that are easy to do, and as they build on each other over a long period of time, lead to something great. So the way to kind of frame it is like the way compounding works. So say if it's like you're investing money, so, and like basic simple interest you would done 5th or 6th class, so you probably did this in college, Shane, doing your finance stuff, that like you invest €100 Yeah, you would invest €100 and it gets 1% simple interest. So at the end of year one, you have €101. At the end of year two, you have €102. At the end of year three, you have €103. But the way the compounding works is that at the end of year one, you still have €101. But instead of having 102 the following year, you have 102 point something because it's 1% of 101. The first couple of years, or if it's a day or if it's a week, it builds quite slowly and it's very hard to see those changes. But as they build and build and build on top of each other, if you can manage it for 6 months, that's when it makes that huge jump in the difference it can make. And if that's the case, if you're trying to read a little bit more, if you're trying to learn to play an instrument, if you're trying to run a bit more, if you're trying to eat a bit healthier, whatever it might be, it's stacking those really small bits on each other. And when they build up over time, that's what leads to the huge changes. And they say that's how compounding works. That if you were to get 1% better every day, you'll be 37 times better by the end of the year. You'll be 6 times better after the 6-month mark. Whereas if that was just kind of linear, you'd just be kind of that little bit better the whole time because they build. And that's why we probably all got you seen exponential curves there earlier in the year when we were worried about how case rates and all like that might go up. But that's how it works in terms of your habits. They just build on top of each other and multiply massively.
But yeah, it really is for it's not just something for either end of the spectrum. This is something across the board that it doesn't matter who you are, what change or goal it is that you're setting. It is just being that little bit consistent and building on top of the small changes that you make, and not just kind of saying 1 week and I suppose what we're talking about here is as we're coming into a season where I suppose fad diets or juice cleanses, these kind of things are rampant. They just explode this time of year, or in the new year around January. Is that doing something that promises you big results in a short time with one change, or with one big change all of a sudden, is only going to set you up for failure and repeated failure. And not that I want to be negative here or anything, but it's that quick fix or that rapid step to get towards whatever your goal is. It seems very attractive, but nothing good ever really came easily, and it is just about setting that goal and then just figuring out how do you go after reaching that goal. If it's something you can work on yourself by making small little changes and just building on them long term, then that's great. If it's something that you need a coach for, then there's plenty of great coaches out there to help with that too. But it's one step, it's 1 foot in front of the other. It's one step at a time that you're really trying to take when going about making changes or reaching for any specific goal. And like you said, Murph, there, it doesn't matter if it's reading a book. You're not going to go from not reading any books to saying, okay, I'm going to read 5 books in the week. You're setting yourself up to fail straight away. It might be something as simple as I'm going to read a page in the day, and then if you get through a week of reading a page a day, you might go, well, I might read 2 pages a day, and you might build that up. And just as you said, as the lads were mentioning with James Clear with Atomic Habits, is that you're just building on the structure that you're putting in place continuously, so that you keep kind of exponentially improving. So
in the book, James talks about the 4 laws of behavior change, and you could just use one of them, but if you stack the 4 of them upon each other, then you're far more likely to implement change and lead to something bigger over time. The 4 goals are making it obvious, making it attractive, making it easy, and making it immediately satisfying. So to get to that long-term bigger thing, you have these little small steps along the way. So I will go through a few examples here now. We'll trash them around. So making it obvious. If it's a case of, like we just said there, you want to read, like something really simple is leave a book beside the toilet. So when you sit down to go toilet, like, oh, there's a book, I'll just pick it up and read it. And set yourself that tiny little goal of, like you said there, reading 1 page. If you've read 1 page, you could be like, oh, 1 page is so easy. I might read a couple more there now. But set yourself the minimum goal of 1 page. You can always read more than that, and it's that nice little achievement to read 1. But like, oh, I really want to find out what's happens next. And you turn over, and suddenly you have 5 pages read. And the next day, if you're pressed for time, just read 1 again. it's fine. But having that small little, like really easy to achieve goal and then build on it, or just barely achieve it, whichever you like. Making it attractive, instead of starting off with your first book and trying to read something like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, which would take you forever to get through, just pick up a nice little small interesting book. Like the first, like a few that really jumped out at me is easy to read, or like anything by Michael Lewis, because he's just an unbelievable storyteller. Stuff from Malcolm Gladwell. There's really good, like, they give you really good information, but in a really nice way to tell a story. Also, just read some fiction. Like, throw back to your younger self and read a bit of Harry Potter or whatever like that. Just make it really attractive to read. Same thing, and that ties in with making it easy, so that if it's an interesting thing to read, you're more, it's just easier as to do, and then make it immediately satisfying. Like, I like to have, you said there, you have your journal, but like little tiny habit trackers. And like, if it's just a case of you leave a card down and every time you read a page you make a tick, like, it's so nice to see 20 ticks lined up beside each other. You have that little satisfaction, like placing the tick down there, and you're happy out with it. So they're the kind of 4 laws, and we'll just look at a few examples of those there. Sorry, Dan, what'd you say?
I said my dog had 20 of those at one point, right? 20 ticks. But yeah, you know, that's literally it. Like, but it is just like, so what we're going to touch on today is just a good few examples and a good few different things that we think are handy. But it is important to note that these are all just kind of suggestions, and that there may be something for any of you listening or watching this episode that focusing in on yourself. And, you know, that's where it kind of comes out, even with the SMART goals, making sure that whatever your goal or target that you're setting is relevant, that it's relevant to you, that it's but also your measures along the way too, and how you look to track it. Say, like, there's no point in going out and saying, oh, I'll buy a whiteboard and I'll write, you know, the dates and that, and, you know, tick a box and that, but it not being something you've any interest in doing, you know, and forcing yourself into doing that. Across the board, everything should be kind of relevant to the person you are, and whatever way you can work these things into your current lifestyle and into the changes you're looking to make.
I think you touched on it there, Murph, that it should be immediately satisfying or satisfying. I think there's still kind of a feeling out there that if you're trying to achieve something that's worth achieving, you have to suffer in some way. Like, it has to be almost like a penance, when that's not really, like, more often than not, it's following a process, not necessarily. So say, for example, Damo, you mentioned the fad diets. People assume, right, well, this is torture. I'm only allowed to have 3 juices a day and no food. It must be working. Whereas they should be looking at, why would I put myself through that? What am I actually looking to achieve? So again, it boils down to looking your initial goal assessment, like, what exactly do you want? Not just looking for the thing that's almost going to put you through the most pain, because you think that's pain is good almost. And it's such an antiquated concept, but it's still very much prominent, especially in weight loss.
Let's look at a few more kind of fitness-oriented goals and how we can apply the 4 laws of behavior change to those. If it's a case of you want to start going to the gym, I'd first of all set myself the goal of making it really, really simple. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to walk in there. You can turn right around and walk back out again if you want, but just walk in there, and that's it. You'll find that once you do walk in, you'll do something. If it's just a case of walking on the treadmill for 5 minutes, fair enough. But set yourself that tiny goal of just walking in, like checking in, beep the card, whatever it might be. If you need to, like, go to change room and change, or whatever you're allowed to do with restrictions now, just go in there, and that's your goal. To adhere to the 4 laws, to make it obvious, pack your bag the night before and leave it at the front door. So it's a case of you actually can't get out the door unless you pick up the bag and move it out of your way. When the bag is in your hand, it's obvious enough to remind you, oh yeah, I'm supposed to bring this with me. Make it attractive. Go to a nice gym. Don't go to some dingy one that's dirty, with terrible trainers, with poor gear, with crooked floors, that the weights have nothing written on them, or you're trying to scratch away and see, is it 25 pounds or is it 25 kg? I can't remember. Like, spend that little bit extra. What you spend extra now to make it more attractive means you're more likely to use it, and it'll pay off massively in the long term in terms of healthcare. Make it easy. So try and find something that's on your way to or from work or is remotely close. And then to make it immediately satisfying. Like, if it's a case of you buy yourself some nice gym gear to wear, or you get yourself a pair of nice earphones to give yourself that reward to make it a little bit more satisfying to go in there, then by all means do it. To give yourself that little reward that, oh, I have this nice gear to wear now, or I have these nice earphones to listen to good music or an audiobook or whatever it is while I'm in there. and there you can apply them to running. The same goes for like, or to gymming. If you were to apply it then to running, like get a nice pair of runners. Like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and have that there as making it that little bit more attractive or a little bit more satisfying. Pay a subscription to Audible if you want to listen to some nice intro. Like they don't have to be like, oh, I'm learning all the time. Like listen to a nice fantasy book, listen to Twilight on your audio book while you're out running if it helps you chill when you're running or whatever like that, to make it that little bit more easier or again immediately satisfying, so you're more likely to want to do it as much as possible. When I was looking up stuff about this today as well, Thomas Rank, I'd really recommend his YouTube channel. He's gotten massively better at playing the guitar over the years, just by making it as easy and obvious for himself as possible. So when he bought his guitar first, like it came with the warning to say, oh, always keep it in the case so it doesn't dry out. He lives in Colorado, like where it's really dry. But he just found, because he had to go take it out of the case and then start playing, he just didn't play as much. So he just left it beside where he normally sits. Now he just sits down. I'll sit beside me. I'll pick it up. I'll play a few notes. I'll leave it back down again. And he said, as soon as he started doing that, he just started getting way better because it was so much easier and obvious to himself to play it, as opposed to, I really need to commit to doing this at 2:30 every day. It was just, no, pick it up and do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they're all fantastic. And I suppose the only thing I was going to touch on there, Murph, was that even if we use the example of going into the gym, because that is going to be one of the big things that people are going to do in January. It's very common. And with that, people going in the door of the gym, it's a great first step, but there's a reason there's a big drop off every year. And gyms kind of depend on people taking out year memberships in January and only going maybe for the first few weeks of January and not turning up for most of the rest of the year. And I suppose one of the big issues I see with people and clients is that they'll go in and they'll get that first few steps inside the door, and they might get on the treadmill or something, but they'll start looking around and they'll look at what other people are doing. And the people you're going to focus on most when you're, when going to the gym is new for you, and this is a whole new experience, or even if it's an old experience that you haven't done for a while, is you look to the people who are lifting the most or running the fastest, or who look like they're really on top of things, and you'll compare yourself to them. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this is what often does happen, is that you almost talk yourself out of going because you're not necessarily at their level from the get-go. But it's so important to remember when you go in like that. If you've gone in the door, that's such a huge first step. But then after that, remembering that you're at your level and you have your own goal that you're working towards. So that's where having a little bit of a plan in place, where you know what you're working for, so you can see what these other people are doing. You can see how strong they are, how fit they are. You can appreciate them for that, but remembering that you're at your level and that you're there to work at your level, and that everyone in that gym, or even if it's going out running, that everyone there is at their own level, working to within their own abilities. And it's just something that I see that I suppose, especially for people who are maybe just starting to make a change, this can be a big thing where they can almost just psych themselves out of it. So it is worth just keeping that in mind. You're at your level and you're there to work at your level to slightly improve your level, not to compare yourself to anyone else who may happen to be in the gym or wherever it is that you're going to. I think that's a very important thing to note.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I suppose on that kind of point, like a lot of people, as you said, will go into the gym the first time and it'll be very intimidating. But I suppose nowadays there's not just the one type of gym anymore. Like it's not just your traditional bodybuilding gym full of kind of big, huge, jacked up people. Like there's so many different fitness outcomes, and January is almost the ideal opportunity that most people will be doing weekly free trials or daily free trials. We can go around, you can sample all these different things, because if you try most of the different fitness fads or class things that are around at the moment, you will find one that you like, or at least one that you like over the other ones. So it's worth taking that extra bit of time and try sample what's available to you, and just give yourselves the best tool to commit. Because as we know, like you can't get everyone to go in and do a bodybuilding split type program. They won't enjoy it. It won't get them the results they want. And most importantly, again, they won't enjoy it. Whereas if you can find something that people actively want to do, it's half the battle.
Yeah, that's a huge point, Shane. The enjoyment, like, and again, it's another thing that most people would think is very obvious, but if you're not enjoying what you've decided to do, it's going to be a chore. So it is important when whatever it is that you choose, and that's why we're mentioning whether it's reading, whether it's going for a run, whether it's going to the gym, whatever it is that you're looking to improve upon, that it's something that's very much an interest of yours or a focus of yours for whatever reason, whether it might be that for health reasons you may have to take up exercise, and at least it's there's a drive there for you. There's something that you can actually attach onto and latch onto and go, yeah, this is why. But if you're forcing yourself to do something because you perceive it to be something, say you perceive it to be the right thing to do, well, that might be something that it just might be too big of a hurdle for you to get over. So yeah, that's very important.
It's also worth considering that, and to touch back on why to make things as easy as possible, is that other stuff in life will crop up regardless. Like, you can't always plan for every eventuality, or it's not always going to, things may not be going as smooth as they currently are. Hopefully, if they're going smooth for you right now. And I think one of the quotes again from the book is, you don't rise to the level of your goals. So if you set these really, really high goals, because like realistically, every one of the 8 sprinters standing on the 100 meters final, their goal is to win the Olympic medal, but only one of them actually does it. So it's not like who sets the best goal is ultimately going to achieve it. There's far more stuff. To state as well that you fall to the level of your systems. So putting all of these systems in place that prevent you falling off the wagon or whatever it might be to get there is really what's going to help you achieve the end goal, as opposed to having this lofty thing or saying, oh, I'm so motivated to meet it. That motivation won't always be there. It's just making it as easy as possible to stay on track. And like, just some simple things there is setting in your schedule that you're going to go to the gym, say for example 4 days a week, but of those 4, take one of them away, keep it in your schedule if you keep a Google Calendar or however like that, and use that time to go buy food and prep it for the week. So that way, when you are likely to get hungry or go snacking, or you don't have time to cook for the rest of the week, having that scheduled in there to say, Sunday evening from 6 to 7:30, I'm going to go to Lidl or Aldi or wherever, buy all my food and batch cook a load of meals and have them in the fridge and in the freezer. And that just makes things so much easier then for the rest of the week, that if you are going gymming, yeah, have a good meal, come home to straight after it, have a decent lunch to have every day so I'm fueled when I go to the gym and all like that. And having those systems in place and being consistent with them will make reaching those goals so much easier.
Actually, diet is another area, and I know we if anyone here listening has listened back to any of our other podcasts where we've chatted about diet and diet structure and stuff, we'd have covered a lot of this. But just like exercise, just whatever changes you're looking to make, waking up on January 1st and completely overhauling your diet from that day forward, unless you have a real steeliness about you, that's a very short term. That's going to be a very short term change. It's going to be much easier to maybe kind of fall away from the change you're looking to make. So again, with your diet, with your diet or your training or whatever it might be that you're looking to improve upon, it's gradual changes and then building on them. I know we started off today talking about that, but it can become something that's almost like, oh, exercise, right, I'll gradually increase my exercise, or reading, I'll gradually increase it. And then the diet is just like, I went from being carnivore to vegan overnight, and there tends to be big swings, especially this time of year. And we see it with juice cleanses, which are dangerous, to put it mildly, but we see it with just the diet as well, where all foods that we enjoy disappear and we end up eating meals or meal structures that they're just a complete overhaul, and that you're not giving yourself your best foot forward there with that big approach.
So what are some of the small steps we could start to bring in if we weren't to change our diet on January 1st or January 2nd? What's like a realistic step we could bring in week 1 that would slowly build to something else in week 2 or week 3?
For me, it's the first thing when it comes to the diet change is just setting a structure. if you have a structure, fine, but for a lot of people there isn't there doesn't tend to be a structure. So setting a structure to your meal pattern each day. So that might be just having a breakfast, lunch and dinner. That you actually make sure that you have a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, that it's not a case of I'll eat whenever I think about eating, or that you set that pattern there and you set a structure in those meals. That still leaves all choice available for foods. It doesn't restrict anything, it doesn't remove anything, but it just puts a structure there so that you can then start to build on that and notice whether you are low on energy at different points in your day, or if you notice that you get hungry at specific points in your day, these type of things. Then you're able to start picking at your diet little by little if you have a pattern to your diet and a structure there with that.
And what helps us set up that structure? So say like week one, I'm just going to focus on making sure I have a breakfast every day. What are some small steps I can do to make sure I have breakfast?
Well, firstly, it's having food in the house, having options there for you. That if you happen to be the kind of person that jumps into their car and they pick up something, like they pick up their coffee on the go, and it can be very hard then to maintain that structure, because some days you might just run into a shop, pick up a coffee and go. More days you might run in, pick up a coffee and a wrap and some sausages or whatever. There could be anything. But having food in the house. And then I suppose, and it depends on what foods you're looking to have, obviously enough, but it could be something simple, having food prepped the night before, that maybe something like overnight oats there, if they're sitting in the fridge, they're ready to go. So hang on, I'm not going to waste food. It's there, it's ready. That's my breakfast. It could be something like, say, even I know that if I take myself, for example, my morning structure is focused around my first coffee. So I have a little routine built up around that. So while I'm boiling the kettle and putting my coffee into my AeroPress, I'm then prepping my breakfast as well at the same time. That basically the food is there for you, and that you're setting up some kind of a routine that you can kind of get behind with that food. So if you like having omelets, maybe it's a case of that you need to get up an extra 10 or 15 minutes early to prep that or to get that ready. But just having the food in the house is really the first step.
And even like to make it, again, as obvious as possible, make your overnight oats, leave them in the fridge and leave your car key on top of it. So there's no chance you forgetting it. You're like, oh, I need my car key to go. Where is it? Oh, it's in the fridge. Oh yeah, I made this last night. You pick it up and bring it with you. And it's making it ridiculously easy and obvious to do these simple things. Same as if you want to have eggs for breakfast. Before ever you start saying, oh, I need to start getting up 15 minutes earlier. The night before, just boil 2 eggs and you have them there with you. And if it's just a case of you crack them and eat them as you're driving in the car, that's grand. But make it as simple as possible to achieve stuff like that. And like Damien said, the first thing you need to do is make sure there are eggs, or there are porridge oats, or there's Greek yogurt or frozen fruit in the house, so you can do stuff like that.
I feel a big part of that is as well, if you commit to doing something like that, if you're going to decide, right, I'm going to prep my breakfast beforehand, because that's my big problem, I can't get up earlier, prepping beforehand. If you commit to that for, say, 2-3 weeks, you'll be surprised how easy it becomes then. It's once you get over that kind of initial hurdle of doing it where you're like, oh, I really don't want to do this now or this evening, it'll become almost second nature. So it's just something you do every evening. Before you go to bed, you prep your breakfast, and then it's all done. So it just becomes, like you said, it becomes habit, and then you're just building on it from there.
And I think it was actually one of BJ Fogg's that when he was doing his original research, he had 4 words and 2 spaces. I will do ... when ... And when he worked with anyone in terms of behavior change, he gave him that piece of paper and they had to fill in the ... So it's a case of I will. So, and if it's before bed, if it's you're taking your creatine before you go to bed, when I take my creatine, I will prep my overnight oats. Or when I brush my teeth, I will take my vitamin D because it's wintertime and I don't get enough sun. And whatever is like that, it has to be tied to something else. You're already 99% sure that you are going to do. And when I'm boiling my rice for my dinner, I'll drop 2 eggs in there. So it just boils when the rice is cooking. And you just make it as easy as possible to just stack the habits on top of each other. So when one is being done, you just add another one that takes no extra effort or minimal extra effort there on top of it already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that was where my coffee one came from, because
I don't know.
And say when you're making the coffee, what do you have for breakfast? Say,
and that's it could differ from day to day. Now, most days it would be something like Greek yogurt with a little bit of granola and berries.
And do you leave the granola beside the coffee? Like, do you have a little cue that way? So when I take out when I reach in for the coffee, the granola is there beside me. So like, I'll just take the two of them out at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's a full routine that I have. I come in, I fill the kettle, pop that on, I open the press, take out my AeroPress, take out my coffee, take out my granola, take out my creatine, my vitamin D. Everything's just there in front of me, and then it's just step by step. I literally go from pouring the coffee in, coffee goes back into the press. I have my Greek yogurt, then goes into the bowl. Granola goes on top of that. Water is boiled into the kettle. Like, it's a step-by-step thing where it becomes a process that even as I'm saying it there, I'm like, it's second nature to me, but it literally takes up no thought process for me in the morning. It's just A, B, C as I'm going through my steps, and it is something that, right, okay, day one, you're not going to maybe have 4 or 5 different things click together, but it like we said, you're compounding the change you're trying to make. I have coffee every morning, so with that coffee I started going, okay, well, I'm going to have my vitamin D in the morning as well, and then it just things built up one by one, and this has been 6-7 months, I suppose, straight without ever breaking away from that little routine.
Another, to steal a quote from the book, is every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. You are now a person who just has overnight oats granola, yogurt and coffee for breakfast. And that's just it. It's not now a conscious thing you need to put together. It's become subconscious, and you have become that person then. And ultimately that is where you kind of achieve the true achievement from what it is you're trying to put together from that goal. Because I was saying to you just beforehand that when you go from you're trying to get to something, and when you become, it's the way you frame stuff then afterwards. And we use the example there of the person trying to give up smoking fags, and that 3 people are out in the smoking area, and one of them offers one person, here, no, I'm trying to give up. Offers the person beside him, oh no, I don't smoke. And just while both of them are trying to give up fags, just the way they frame it and the way they have now decided what type of person they are has completely made the decision for them as to what they're going to do in future. So when it comes to like health behaviors, and having breakfast is generally a good health behavior, because Damien has become a person who has breakfast and who has a decent serving of protein with his breakfast, again, another good health behavior. It's just been stacked on top of each other over time, and now he has achieved that. Sorry, Shane.
No, I was going to say, it also means because he has that solid structure, if he wants to make little changes or add something in, it's so much easier to add it into that. So say if he did want, like you were saying, if he wanted to start taking vitamin D, which I'm sure he does already, but he could just add it in. If he just positions it beside that coffee, he'll know it's there and it'll be part of his routine, and he'll just do it again on autopilot. So it's just, you can build so much from just having that one solid structure.
I'm not sure if this is the direction you were going next or not, Murphy. When you mentioned 3 people going out together there, it might be a little bit different. Well, it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily more difficult, but a little bit different when it comes to diet. But your support network, when it comes to making changes, whatever way it is, whether it's diet, whether it's training, whether it's a book you're reading, we have book clubs, we have gyms with like CrossFit gyms, different things like that for training. You personal trainers. You build it. I suppose what I'm saying is the support network that you build or that you have around you is so important. Now that could be, I think, like we were chatting beforehand, it might be that you and your best friend are looking to make some change, and but you're nowhere near each other, and especially with COVID and stuff like that, we're not able to see each other that much. But this applies across the board, that with things like Zoom and that, setting up a point in your week where you might chat about what you're doing, or even a WhatsApp group. Like I think Murphy mentioned, like if you're going to the gym and you're both following the same program, but in different gyms, and you put in, for my 3 sets on bench, I did 50 kg for 8, 50 kg for 8, and 50 kg for 10 reps, and then you come back with, I did this amount for, and you're chatting over and back, but you're building up that little team spirit, that little kind of accountability to somebody else, and that is super important, because if we're trying to overhaul our lifestyle in some way, shape or form, even if we're making small little changes as we go, it's made much tougher if we're trying to do it by ourselves without somebody there to, whether it's to do it with you or to just support you along the way and promote, the changes that you're trying to make. So say if you're trying to make a change to your diet, but and you knew that chocolate was your downfall, but you lived in a house where chocolate was constantly being put in front of you, that would be that's going to be tough. So getting people on board around you to appreciate the changes you're looking to make, and to get them to kind of to understand it and to support you in the change you're looking to make is so important too.
Yeah, as well as support, I think accountability is really, really key there. Both for you to be accountable to them and them to be accountable to you. And then also to bounce like little mini struggles you have along the way. It may be something they encountered a week ago and found a way to overcome it. And they throw it back to you like, oh, that is such a good idea. I never would have thought of it. Little things like that. Like say, oh, I was going running and I just found that once I go past kind of 5K, my foot gets really sore. And the other person, this is not physio advice, by the way. Oh, I actually found once a week just by rolling my foot out on a tennis ball, it helped take away some of that pain. And they're like, oh, it's a really good idea. I'll try it. And then they're able to go and do 5.5 or 6K or whatever like that.
Should we also say, Murph, that we're not mechanics, so that key in the fridge thing might be an issue?
I was thinking that actually. That's been going through my head since you said it. But also on that, we've kind of touched on it when we've talked about CrossFit. One of the big benefits we'll all agree to CrossFit is that community aspect. And I feel more than anything else, it even just breaks down that intimidation factor. So say if you see someone benching twice what you bench in the gym, you're automatically intimidated by that person. But in, say, a CrossFit environment where you get talking to them, you'll find out you have a lot more in common than you think. And they're nearly going along the same process. Fair enough, they're 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of you, but they start in the same place and they do the same things kind of day in, day out. And it just shows you that you're not a million miles away from where you need to be. You just have to know the steps to take to get there. And seeing someone who's gone through that process can have much more of a benefit than, say, someone who's, even more than someone who's a coach with all their knowledge. Seeing someone who came from your position can be so much more powerful, and it just helps you stay accountable, I think.
And it's worth remembering too that in those situations that, that intimidation can be there, but you'd be surprised that, especially if you're beginning and you're going up and asking someone, for advice, just you might, be impressed by what they're doing. People are quite generous with their tips and with support. Just randomers, like, and it's worth knowing that just because somebody might look, say, like Shane when he walks onto the bodybuilding stage, walking up to people and just asking them for some tips, people are more than happy to chat most of the time and to actually give bits of advice. So just to maybe not to fear those people too much. Shane turned out to be lovely.
I mean, yeah, on my day I'm perfectly fine. But yeah, I mean, like nobody was born with all the knowledge in the world on this gym stuff. Like they've more than likely done the exact same thing where they walked up to someone and asked them what they were doing, or Googled it, or they found out some way. Like they didn't just know what to do or know how to use these machines. They've found out off people as well. And again, like Damien said, it's a couple of minutes of their time. It's not going to be the end of the world. They're more than likely going to be very helpful.
If some of your goals are based around giving up something or removing an aspect of something or lowering the amount of it from your life, the 4 laws of behavior change we spoke about earlier, making it obvious, attractive, easy, and immediately satisfying, you just reverse those. So make it less obvious, make it less attractive, make it hard, and make it immediately dissatisfying. So if you were to apply that some stuff, say like you said there earlier about buying chocolate, the first thing I do is you don't have chocolate in the house, so it's not easy and it's not obvious. You make it unattractive. If you live 5 minutes from the shop, just make a little rule yourself that, okay, if I want chocolate, I have to walk to the shop and go there, particularly over the winter months. And if it's raining, you're not allowed to get in the car, you have to walk. And if you're willing to go through a wet, cold evening, walk there, buy the chocolate, walk back, if you want it that much, go for it. Okay, like, but you have
And
made
enjoy
it
it then.
less obvious, less easy,
Second
less
it.
attractive. And I don't know, does the satisfaction outweigh the walking there in the cold? If it does, fair enough. Like you deserve it then. And it's the same with a number of things. Like if you're saying I want to cut down the amount of telly I watch something you want to watch. Like if there's a show you really say, okay, I'm going to watch it. Then once you've watched it, take the batteries out of the remote and put them in a drawer in the other room. So the next time you want to watch something, it's not just a case of pick up the remote and press it, like, oh, I have to stand up, I went to the next room. And a tiny little breaker in the circuit can be what it needs to stop you doing that. Same with, like, my mum is trying to go up smoking at the minute. So she buys a pack of fags, gives it to my father. So to actually get a fag, she has to go and ask him permission to have one. And just put that, he'll give it to her. Like, but putting that one breaker in the circuit makes it so much harder for her to get one that she's cut her fags from 20 a day down to 5. You know, and little things like that, just making it a slight little bit less obvious, a little bit less attractive, and a little bit dissatisfying to yourself. You have to go and ask someone permission to do something that you normally did without thinking. It just has made a massive difference on you reducing the chance of you having to do something like that.
On that, almost like involuntarily, but I've talked to a few people now in the last couple of months who used to bite their nails, and they said that they've cut that down hugely because their nails taste like hand sanitizer all the time. And it's like, it's something simple like that is like, they were just doing it out of habit, and now that the habit has been broken, or it's made it less appealing, they've stopped doing it. So like, if you asked them 6-8 months ago, would you give up biting your nails? They'd be like, no, I can't do it. Like, I've tried before, it just doesn't work. I almost automatically go back to it. But just that, again, it's so simple, but it makes it unsatisfying, and they just do it then. They just don't want to.
I wonder in the next year or so, will the work for dentists drop because people are wearing masks and are more aware of their breath? Are they just way more likely to brush their teeth more often now as well?
Murph, you think too much, man. It's yeah. So I suppose we've touched on some of the big things there, and I suppose the last one there, when we were talking about just the SMART goals, when we were making, you know, things time related and time bound. I suppose for me, when I'm working with clients, or even for myself, whenever I'm setting any kind of goals or targets in place, have an actual time that you're looking to be at a place by. You know, if it's, I want to run a half marathon by May, that's fine, but set yourself little milestones along the way so that you can tick off and go, yeah, I'm getting in the right direction, I'm getting up towards that point. But having that goal time is important, because if it's a case of I tell myself I want to be able to run a half marathon, but I've no kind of date picked or time of year picked, well, it's very easy then to sod that off, say, if it's raining, or if it's cold, or if I feel tired, or if I'm stressed from work, or if my friends are going doing something, or it's very easy to come up with excuses to go, oh sure, I can get to tomorrow, or I can get to next week. Whereas having that date with some small milestones along the way that you're looking to achieve or meet, that this is the kind that this is going to help you to kind of, I suppose, not necessarily motivate you, because motivation is a very short term thing, but to keep you going, working towards your goal, and to help you kind of bite down and push towards that goal.
I think that's where accountability partners or accountability systems really come into play as well. Like, for example, like, we're recording this on the 22nd of December, so spoiler to anyone who's reading or listening to the new year. But my sister's training for, I think it's a half marathon at the minute. And when she comes home for Christmas, she wants to go to a track and run. So she texts me 3 days beforehand, I'm going to the track to do intervals. Will you come with me? It would be very easy. She generally finds it when she comes home to get herself out to exercise. She just falls into habits. Oh, I don't see mum and dad very often. It's easy to just sit here and chat to them. When she texts me to say that, okay, we're going this time and you're going to be there with me, you've set yourself this thing that you have to go and do. And using accountability partners like that, I think, is really good. She also has a couple of friends that she has said she's going to do a 5K in March, a 10K in June, and then build up to doing that half marathon in November. So you have the small little milestones, but they're also set in place with other people that you have to do them with. Pays for them all in advance. Make sure you get your medal or your t-shirt, whatever it is like that. So there's a number of things keeping her on track. So realistically, if she gets a little bit unmotivated at some stage, she's there like, I actually have a 5K coming up in a week. I need to get out and do a session there now. And neighbour down the road who's come to do it with me is waiting for me there in 5 minutes' time. I need to get out and do it. And like I said, if you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall back on the systems. After the systems you put in place, you're far more likely to stay on track and do the minimum required to still achieve it anyway. Like Ivan, as part of being a PhD student, you have to do an awful lot of writing, and to try and encourage myself to do a bit more writing, I just set myself a goal there. I have to write 50 words a day. Like, you could write in 5 minutes, like if you wanted, but when you sit down and take out the laptop and have like your reference up on one side and what you're trying to say, you write 50 words. Once you 50 written, you're like, I'm on a roll, I'm going to keep going. You often end up writing 150, 200, but actually reaching that goal of 50 is really, really simple. And it's not that daunting when you sit down. And like, if you're having the worst day ever, you just say, I'm just going to write the bare 50. And you get to 51, you're like, grand, done, shut down the laptop, go sleep. Like, so be it if that's what you do someday. But it's all the days you far surpass that, because they keep building on each other. But they will only build on each other if you do that bare minimum of 50 on the days you feel terrible or you don't feel up to it at all. And it's having those simple little steps that are really, really easy to achieve. The man who I talked about earlier, BJ Fogg, I think one of his rules is to, when he wanted to get fitter, he said, when I get up in the morning and go to the toilet, afterwards I will do 1 push-up. And that was it. And every day he ends up doing about like 25. He said, I'm down here now. I've done 1. I might as well keep going. But on the worst day, he just says, I'll just do 1. It's fine. Like, and that's all he feels like doing. Grant. And it's really, really easy to just get down and do 1 push-up. And it's also really easy to stack more on top of it once your minimum goal is easy to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose with all those points, I think it's worth noting that often it is a question that's posed to maybe celebrities or sports stars or whatnot, but it's like, what motivates you, like what motivates you to keep going or to keep improving, and often this time of year will, when these changes or goals are being set in place, motivation is used, and when motivation, I suppose for a lot of people, they don't necessarily realize at the get-go that motivation does dip. It's it's the spark that gets things going, but it doesn't keep the fire lit. And it is worth, I suppose, maybe having a quick chat about I suppose just maybe looking at everything we've just spoken about there in some ways, but just keep in mind that your motivation is what's going to help you put a plan in place and to get that plan going. But motivation will disappear gradually. It'll ebb and flow from time to time, but it's not going to be a constant. So I suppose not to be looking at motivation as your driving force, really. And that's where I suppose working on your habits daily like that, when going to the bathroom or in the morning there, that he does 1 push-up, he doesn't have to motivate himself to do that. He doesn't have to kind of go, right, here I go, but he has the habit, started, and he's kind of maintained it, and it's just something that he will just do there going forward. So have you any thoughts in around motivation and maybe how it can drift off after maybe a week or two of making changes?
Sometimes you possibly need to allow for that when you're planning something long term, and that, like, say if you're putting together a 12-week program to get stronger, just like because there's less variables. Let's say it's looking at powerlifting, you're trying to get your squat, bench, and deadlift much stronger, and your overall goal is to bring your squat from 150 kg to 175, and similar jumps for the other two. That build in times where I'm likely to get tired after 4 to 6 weeks, so I'm just going to put in place an easy week there, and in that easy week I'm just going to look up videos of Jeff Nippard's arm pump workouts, and I'm just going to do those that week. So it's giving me this little thing that's a bit of rest for my body, but it's everyone likes going in and getting a little bit of an arm pump, or you're just doing some different type of exercise. You're still being active, but it's a break from what you're already doing. And because you've had then that little break, when it comes back to chasing the bigger numbers, I'm actually eager to get back to this there again, and forcing yourself to take a break after a while, because that often helps you then come back. It helps you stop before motivation drops enough that you're going to take a step back entirely from it. That you've kind of seen and like this does take a bit of maturity to see that, like, okay, I know motivation tends to drop around this time, that you can plan the step back from it before it starts to fully take place. Same, like, again, I'm trying to write, and generally on Saturdays I'll try and do a few blocks of it, and I'll say, I really feel like I could sit down here now and do an hour of writing. I'm going to set a timer for 45 minutes. And at the end of the 45 minutes, I really want to keep going, but I force myself to stop. I go away and make a cup of tea. And because I force myself to stop while I'm on a roll, and I feel like, oh, I could actually write more here, I go back up and I usually do another 45 minutes at least. So now, instead of doing 1 hour, I've done an hour and a half, because I force myself to take that break in the middle and notice when motivation is likely to drop, and you end up doing more because of it. But again, that does depend on you taking that slightly more mature view of what you're trying to achieve at the end.
I suppose, look, it's like everything we spoke about, Murph. Accountability, having somebody you're accountable to. If motivation does dip, that there's somebody else there that you're kind of, you're pulling and dragging with, or having that support network that we mentioned as well, because there are going to be days there where you don't feel like getting up and going, and there's somebody going to be like, hey, are you getting up to go for a run today? Are you going to the gym today? Or, or you're doing great or something, whatever it might be, it might be positive reinforcement. It could be just asking you how your training is going, or the changes are going, whether it be training, diet, whatever it might be. But it's having all these little things together and working in unison together, so that, when that inevitable moment of motivation dipping comes along, that you're not just out to sea, stuck trying to figure out how to get back onto land by yourself.
I also feel it comes down to, like, an awful lot of the time, the people who are going to fall off, say after that kind of 2-3 week mark, have given themselves too much to do from the start. So say if they'll set up, okay, 1st of January, they're like, right, I'm going to quit drinking, quit smoking, cut my diet right down, and they've just put so many things in front of themselves that fair enough, 1 or 2 weeks they can do it, it's new, they're kind of trying to get their head around it, and then it gets to this phase where they're just like, you know what, this is too much, I either need a break or I have to stop. And then if they need a break, they more than likely won't go back to it. Whereas, again, like we talked about, if you set out a clear structure and a plan from the beginning, you'll know exactly what you want to achieve, and from the start you can tell, okay, well, I've talked to my coach, or I've talked to my friend, and this is too much, I'll just focus on the one thing now up until the end of February. If I got that under wraps, then maybe we can add something else in. But just having a structure and a plan of where you want to go means if you do lose focus 2 or 3 weeks in, you can see the plan. You're like, well, if I drop off here, then by week 5 I'm only going to be here instead of being up here, or I won't be able to push on to the next level, or I won't be able to push on to this weight or this bench press. And just having that structure to default to, or to go back and check, will make a big difference for motivation, rather than just being like, I don't feel like doing it today, I'll just pick up from where I left off, or I'll just go back to it when I get some time.
It's worth bearing in mind that not everyone is motivated to reach their ultimate goals all the time. Like, everyone has dips in motivation. Everyone has like other distractions or stuff going on in life. It's having the steps in place to stop you falling too far off track that is the key to getting you back on them then at the end. Like I said, he just before podcast listened to Ali Abdal, and he said he wants to work on songwriting, and his brother wants to work on joke writing. He wants to be a comedian. So they just set up in their Google Calendar a recurring every day, or Monday to Friday at 4:30. They have a 15-minute call. They hop on Zoom, but they keep it on mute. They don't actually interact with each other. It's there to be accountable to each other, to see that he is writing something. It could be anything, but they do say, honestly, this is me writing my songs, and the brothers there writing their jokes. After 15 minutes, they just stop. Like, you're not going to write the world's greatest joke in 15 minutes. But if you spend 15 minutes writing jokes for a year, that is so many minutes writing jokes. At the end of that year, you're likely to have at least 3 good ones anyway. And spending that bit of time churning stuff out, but being accountable to someone else to churn stuff out, that's when you achieve great things.
Yeah, no, that's. I think we've covered quite a good bit there. I think just before we maybe sign off here, I think maybe with whatever area you might be looking to make a change in and all that, the one area that I want to kind of finish up with focusing in on would be the diet, in that this is a prime time of year. In January, obviously if you're listening to this in June, it's maybe not the case, but January is a prime time of year for, as I said at the outset, fad diets, extreme calorie restriction, massive overhauls of dietary practices, and I suppose real misinformation going around the place. So if you happen to be listening to us, naturally enough, and you're looking to make a change on your diet, make sure you have some bit of good quality information about what you're doing and what changes you're making. And you know, I suppose what I'm trying to get here is focusing on mostly is the likes of your juice cleanses and extreme calorie restriction, as they tend to really be rampant at this time of year, and they set you up to fail, because you put all your eggs into those baskets. And say if we take extreme calorie restriction, well, with that you're going to be left feeling hungry. You're going to be removing foods you enjoy eating from your diet. You are going to be left with very low energy levels. Granted, you may lose quite a bit of, say, weight, if that's your measure, in the first week or two. But a lot of that weight is going to be water weight. It's going to, it's going to be potential muscle. So your lean body mass, you possibly could lose as well, and that you're not going to be in a position where you're losing weight controlled and well, and setting yourself up for long term, I suppose, practices. So it's just one area that I would like to just highlight just before we close off, that there's loads of ways you can go about making changes to your diet, but just to really try to avoid extreme calorie restriction, or any kind of juice focused diets, or slim teas, anything like that tend to save all their marketing for this time of year.
We'll probably look at myths and stuff next week anyway, so we can go into those on more detail.
But even just briefly kind of on that, if you do look at a diet and it seems kind of too good to be true, more than likely it is. But even if you're not sure, you want to double check, do your own research online, or even ask one of the trainers down your gym, even message one of us. Like, it's not going to be, you're not asking for one-on-one coaching. You're just like, I've seen this. Have you heard of it before? Is it bad? Is it good? Do you have any kind of thought towards it? And more than likely than not, again, it's 2 minutes of someone's time. They'll be like, no, I've heard of that. Don't try it. They don't have to give you any recommendations, but just a general opinion on things like that can go a whole way. So just make sure, if you can, ask someone who has a bit of knowledge in the area before you start something that potentially could be dangerous.
Great stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.